Today is the 2nd, I think, of September. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Before we get started and get into these formal things, I want to take the opportunity, because I had the pleasure of walking in with the mayor of Sharptown, our good friend sitting to my left, Doug Gosnell. The most important thing is that today is his 75th birthday, so happy birthday, Doug. I believe he said he officially entered the Old Geezer Club. His words, not mine, when he said that. Anybody who wants to challenge that, feel free to do so.
Do we have to make a motion to sing him happy
A motion
birthday?
to, no, Phil, your comment was?
I said he's nothing but a puppy.
Nothing but a puppy. Well said. Well said, Phil. The other thing, again, just in chatting with Doug on the way in, Doug was recognized a few weeks ago by the Wicomico County Council for 25 years of service for the people of Sharptown. Doug, congratulations and thank you. And then wrapping up the Doug Gosnell portion of the meeting, Doug shared with me that earlier this year he was inducted into the Maryland Municipal League Hall of Fame. So, hear, hear. Happy birthday, Doug. You're welcome. Thanks for all your service over the years. The people of Sharptown are proud. With that, let's get down to business. Hi, Michelle. Let's get down to business. I will call for an approval of tonight's agenda. Thank you, Wayne. Is there a sec? Who said that? Birthday boy? Phil did. Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for a vote to approve. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Agenda passed. Now, approval of the minutes from our August 19th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Tony, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Julie. Any comments or changes on the minutes? All right, hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? They carry unanimously. Looking into the public section tonight, I want to welcome County Councilman Joe Holloway. Joe, it's good to see you. Thank you. And also want to recognize Wicomico County Board of Education member, good grief, John Palmer. Hi, John. It's good to see you. Okay, folks, let's get into tonight. Oh, also, I apologize. Sitting in and attempting to impersonate Paul Wilbur for the day, this is Andrew Illuminati from Paul's firm. Andrew, welcome. Thanks for coming. Absolutely. So Andrew's here for any sort of those legal questions that we usually try to figure out. We were in the middle of Section 700, and one of the things that I think we'll get started with, Wayne was not able to be here at our previous meeting, and we're going to go to, I think it's section, bear with me, 704. Somebody help me, I apologize. That
Capital program, section 704, capital program and budget.
yeah, the capital program and budget. Did we have any thoughts or questions on that from the last time? And I'm trying to get this. Sorry about the microphone, everybody. Any thoughts and questions? Or did we resolve all of them? Because Wayne was kind of missed at the last meeting. All right.
I do have
Go
one
ahead.
comment.
Laura, thank you.
So
It's hard to see everybody so far away in this big room. Thank you.
I was asked to work with Paul Wilbur on
Yes.
drafting some language that would extend the date requirement for a public hearing, and I believe Mr. Illuminati has that language with him. If not, I can email that to everyone. Do you have that with you by chance?
I recall that, and thank you, Laura.
No, I do not.
No worries.
Okay, I can email that out to everyone tomorrow, so
That would
we
be
can
great.
look at that again.
Okay, thank you. I know, go ahead, Wayne, are you going to say something?
No.
Okay. I know where we were, where we had asked Wayne, who was going to do some independent work on Section 706, which addresses the revenue cap in Wicomico County. We didn't have any discussion on that at the last meeting, and so this would be an appropriate time to discuss, just like we do every other section that we've been going over. Are there any thoughts on section 706? And first is A, section 706A, and section 706B, which is where the revenue cap is. Do you have some, yes, Julie?
Sorry, that gets your attention. I just have a question about the consumer price index.
Yeah.
I think we were discussing that or whatever. Is there going to be a big jump
There have been.
in the CPI this?
There have been for the past 3 months.
Right, so will that affect next year's or in the future years if it significant? They said it's been fairly manageable because it's a rolling average, but it seems like it's going to jump significantly.
Yeah, I've got a package of information that I gave Laura that I think if we handed that out, I could walk everyone through. I want to walk you through history, and I want to walk you through how the revenue cap impacts county finances.
Wayne, why don't you hold on for a moment?
Yeah, I'm going to wait until everyone has the package.
So I'll give my version of a brief little bit of background. The following is an opinion. The revenue cap is extremely complicated. I don't think there's 15 people in Wicomico County who could talk about it in any meaningful way. But fortunately, one of the people who can is a member of our Charter Review Committee. It's complicated. And again, having sat in on lots of discussions over the years, it's well known as a thing within Wicomico County, and I think every voter is probably aware that we have a revenue cap. I'm not sure of that, but it's complicated. And Wayne, Wayne, when did you have that forum debate at Salisbury University? That was a good decade ago, wasn't it?
No, before that.
Yeah, so a long time ago, there was a forum held at Salisbury University, and there were just two people there. I don't even know if it was a debate as much as it was a discussion, and Wayne was one of the two people. So again, got to take advantage of the people who are on this committee who have a little bit of knowledge in certain areas. So with that caveat and introduction, Wayne, I will hand it over to you and let you share some of what you've just handed out.
Okay, so on the first page, I wanted to give you a sense of what comprises the county general fund revenue. So you'll see that real property taxes, and this is based on our current fiscal year budget. So our current real property taxes are projected to be $61.3 million. That's 39% of our general fund revenue. Our local income taxes are $56.4 million. That's 35% of our total revenue. Use of prior year's fund balance, which is really just operational savings, is $4 million. That's 2.5% of general fund revenue. So when you take those three components, that's 76.5% of our general fund revenue. With respect to local income taxes, we're at the state's maximum allowable local income tax rate, which is 3.2%. So we don't have the ability, nor from my stance do we want to, raise the local income tax rate. I think that would be economically and fiscally counterproductive. So with that as a background, I went back 5 decades to see how the rates of inflation have behaved. And what I've given you on the summary page, 1970 to 79, the average was, for that decade, was 7.4%. The high was 13.3%. The low was 3.3%. 80 to 89, the average was 5.1, high was 12, low was 1.1. 90 to 99, average was 2.6, high was 3.3, low was 1.6. 2000, 2009, 2.5 average, 4.1 high, point 0.1 low. 2010 to 2020, 1.9 average, high was 3, low was 0.7. You have in detail all the years behind that summary sheet, and you'll see that the number of years where the inflation rate was above 2% in the past 5 decades was 37 years out of 50. The number of years that it was at 2% or less was 13. The 5-year decade average rate was 3.9%. I then went and selected counties that are our approximate size on the next summary page. And I tried to give you a sense of how their real property revenue and local income tax revenue behave. So Calvert County, 91,000. Their real property revenue is 139 million. Mill rate of 93.7, which is about the same as ours. Their local income tax is 74.566 million. They have a tax rate of 3%, which is lower than our 3.2. Cecil, which is probably the most comparable county to Wicomico in my opinion. 102,000 people, almost 103. 106, almost 107 million in real property revenue. Mill rate of $1.04. Local income tax revenue of 55,806. Tax rate of 3. St. Mary's, which from a wealth standpoint is not comparable to Wicomico, but the population is proximate. 105 million in real property revenue, 85-cent mill rate, 85.5 million in local income tax revenue, 3% local income tax rate. Wicomico, you'll see, has the lowest real property revenue yield of any of these 4 counties. We also have the lowest local income tax revenue yield of any of these 4 counties. And I'm just presenting this to you as just data. I'm not taking.
Understood.
I'm not opining here.
Yep.
The other thing that I would want to pass along to you is that if you get, I don't know how many of you get SWED's economic snapshot on a monthly basis, but if you look at our housing market and you look at the movement in average prices of homes sold, you'll see that for the year to date in Wicomico County, the average value of a home sold has risen by 10.2%. I point that out because when you have a 2% revenue cap, you can't, that natural buoyancy in your base is suppressed by the revenue cap. Without the revenue cap, if you kept the mill rate the same, a third of the county would be reassessed and the values would probably move that 10%. So I'm not, again, taking a position. I'm just pointing out this is how the math works. So I thought that would be helpful in terms of any discussion that the group wanted to have with regard to the revenue cap and any recommendation that the group might want to make.
Thank you, Wayne, very much.
Sure.
Julie?
Does Wicomico County have a transfer tax?
We
We don't.
We do not. We had a transfer tax, and when we hit the doldrums, we as a county decided that we would not impose a transfer tax to try to support the real estate community. So currently we don't. We have the ability to levy a transfer tax.
Doldrums 2008.
Yes.
Other, looking around the room, thoughts? Michelle?
I would say.
You're a long way away, so thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
no,
would
you're
say, I would say transfer tax is one thing to look at, definitely, especially when he's sitting there saying property values have gone up 10%. That would definitely be a way to bring money in. But I think before we do anything overall, I think we need a very good, very wise, comprehensive tax study, not something that's been out there, but somebody to look at all avenues that are available before we hit the tax cap. You know, the voters voted for that tax cap, and they voted for a specific reason. And that was to try to keep things under control. You know, I see all the inflation tables, and to be very honest with you, I really think inflation's going to be coming back. I think we're hitting for Jimmy Carter days again, unfortunately. So to say, you know, inflation isn't going to reoccur, I think that's not a reasonable bet.
Yeah,
So-
I would point
go ahead.
out that since the revenue cap was imposed, if you look at those last 2 decades, for the past 20 years, we've had a relatively low inflation environment. So in that regard, the revenue cap over the past 2 decades, I don't believe has really done the county damage in terms of increased costs to the county exceeding the amount of revenue that we can bring in. But I would agree with you that when I look at some of the policy decisions that are being made by the current administration, I get very nervous because I lived through the Carter years. And I don't want to do it again.
I think most all of us have. Looking around the room. So, yes, sir, Dallas,
So, yeah, finance is not my specialty.
noted.
So, as I understand it, you know, a rate cap says, you know, I'm just pulling numbers out of the air. You're not going to pay more than 5%. So if you spend $1, you owe 5 cents on the tax. However, the revenue cap says, all right, we're not going to collect more than 5% of what we are supposed to. So if somebody owes us $10, but the revenue cap says we're only allowed to, is at 5%, we're only collecting $5 or whatever. What I get confused at is, how does inflation factor in this? I mean, we're talking about inflation here. I don't understand what the inflation does to this, to these numbers. Maybe, can I get like a napkin explanation?
Yeah, the CPIU, it's the lesser of the CPIU for the year, or 2%. That's the amount of revenue on, and I'll make this clarification. That limits the amount of revenue that you can collect on the existing assessable real estate tax base at the beginning of the year. New construction for the year is set aside. So we do get the benefit, if you will, of real property taxes on new construction during the year. But then at the end of the year, that new construction is folded into then the existing assessable base for that next following year. So to the extent when we're having a very robust construction environment, and to some extent we have, it helps us with our real property taxes. When things slow down, when real estate transactions then slow down, that's when it becomes problematic if you have a high rate of inflation. High rate of inflation than 2%.
So, are there any comments? Yes, sir, Mr. Holloway. Joe, excuse me, would you mind? Thank you very much, sir.
You made a comment, Wayne, you made a comment that, is this on?
It is, yes, sir.
That raising the property tax rate would not be as counterproductive as raising the income tax rate.
No,
Why-
I said raising the income tax rate would be counterproductive.
Right, okay, so why is raising the property tax rate just as counterproductive?
I'm not taking a position. I'm trying to present the group with the financial fiscal history and the inflation rates that we have experienced as a country over the past 50 years.
Well, I understand you're not taking a position.
Right.
But you made the statement that, it would be counterproductive to raise the income tax rate, because we're at our limit anyway. We can't.
Yeah, we
raise
don't have the
it.
ability
We
to do
can't-
it
We can't
anyway.
raise it, which is fine.
Right.
But what would be the difference? I mean, you're both situations, you're taking money out of citizens' pockets. So,
Well, there's certain things that we're going to have to pay for in the future, and we're going to have to find the revenue to do it.
So,
I've heard a lot of talk about water and sewer. That's going to be enormously expensive, and we're going to have to find the money to pay for it if we want to build it.
So may
So-
I make note?
Yes,
This is
Catherine.
actually a note from the county council, their proposal summaries on section 706, and it sort of pulls off of what you were just saying. This section, and in detail for section B, limits how much revenue and real property taxes the county can collect compared with the previous year to no more than 2% of the consumer price index, or consumers, whichever is less. Historically, the constant yield rate certification prepared by the Maryland State Department of Assessment and Taxation is used to determine the 2% cap. So this is the question. Should a provision be added to clarify how the 2% is calculated? Should there be special exceptions allowed to go over the revenue cap, such as financing a new sheriff's office? And it asks us to refer to Talbot County Charter Amendment. And then go to question number 32. Should there be a new provision that requires unanimous county council approval to set a property tax rate higher than the tax rate in the preceding year? And it says, please see Montgomery County Charter Amendment. So I just wanted to make note.
Thanks,
Those are
Catherine.
some of the suggestions.
We already have the ability under state law to exceed the revenue cap for the Board of Education.
Laura?
I just have a handout from
From
Mr.
Bob.
Benson.
And,
Yeah.
and thank you.
Never
And
changes to that.
for the group, my apologies. Bob Benson can't be here tonight. His mom has to deal with his mom, who's got some medical issues tonight, so please keep a good thought for Bob's mom. And he was kind enough to drop off some things for Laura, and I failed to mention that, but Bob just wanted the group to know. So,
John Palmer has a question.
I just got a quick
yeah,
question. You want us to wait till the very end?
yeah,
I don't want to comment on this section here.
I understand.
But if you'd like, I would wait till the very end.
yeah.
Well,
I'm going,
Mike-
yeah, I'm going to ask you to, I'm going to ask you to hold on, please. Thank you. So, thank you. Now, what these are, I believe, yeah, Bob had these ready at the last meeting, but we didn't talk about this. These are the three questions. So, Talbot County went to the ballot. They have a revenue cap. They broke the revenue cap into three different questions, and these are the charter amendments that were put forth for the Talbot County voters in 2020. Again, thank you, Bob Benson, for doing this. And all three of these passed. So Talbot County was attempting to, change its revenue cap also, and these were the three amendments that were put forth by the Talbot County Council for the voters to consider. So that's just FYI, in the same way that what Wayne presented was FYI. So I'm going to take a moment here, and I'm going to, I guess, take my prerogative as the chair of this group. The Charter Review Committee, as with many, and Catherine, thank you for pointing out what the council has asked us to look at. I'm not sure there's any bigger political animal thing, controversy thing in Wicomico County than the revenue cap. It was Mr. Palmer, who's in the audience, was one of the authors of it. It went to the voters a long time ago, and every time there's discussion of it, it's a pretty heated discussion. I'm of the belief that the Charter Review Committee should just, thank you very much. This is a serious political hot potato, and I don't think it's the role of the Charter Review Committee to walk down this path. it's just a personal opinion. I'm just weighing in. I, again, very much appreciate the data that Wayne has collected, the comparative data that Bob put together relative to how Talbot County handled this. But I think that the Charter Review Committee would be better served by leaving this political hot potato to the elected office holders in Wicomico County. That's just a thought of mine, which is just one thought out of this entire group. I see Michelle's hand up first, then I'll go to
Mike,
you,
you and
Julie.
I are not normally on the exact same page, but we're on the same page on this one.
Thanks, Michelle. Julie?
So it'll be on the record that we're making no recommendation or prioritizing this at all?
What I would say is that just like with every other thing we're doing, if somebody wants to make a motion, we will gladly entertain that motion. I'm saying that on a question like this, I'm not saying we're not, our recommendation would be sort of, if the group was okay with it, would reflect what my comments just were, which is that this is a big issue that is a political issue and probably left to the political elected officials to handle. And that might be our comment on this section. Phil, I saw your hand up.
I agree. I think it might be worth pointing out that in the years in the budget when it was possible to raise the taxes and stay within the revenue cap provisions, the elected officials
Sure.
have failed to do that.
Sure.
So the base keeps dwindling, keeps being depressed. So if we suggested something as a change to that, we'd be asking the same elected officials who have never opted to raise those taxes, to put it on the ballot, to raise the taxes, which I don't think they will do. And so I think it's almost a moot question, to tell you the truth. So the atmosphere and the public opinion regarding the revenue cap is that it's a good thing for Wicomico County. Some of us don't agree with that.
Correct.
And I was personally involved when the revenue cap was imposed. And the voters spoke, and they spoke overwhelmingly to have a revenue cap. So I agree that we can spend a lot of time on it, but I don't think I think we'd be wasting our time.
Tony, yeah, thank you, Phil.
I-
Tony,
I-
yes, sir.
Phil said it well, but if you go back, it was a referendum. It failed. If you look at it, 65% of the people voted to impose the revenue cap. 65%. That's if I was running for office and got 65%, I say, I think I did okay.
You should run for office again, Tony, and see how you do.
No,
Kidding.
I'm buoyed by age.
Yes, sir.
But anyhow, it's something to think about. I think Phil said it. Now, if somebody wants to bring it up and put it on a referendum, which it was before, God bless them.
And if, Wayne, did you have a comment? Yes, sir.
I agree with the group's sentiment on this, because I do think this is a decision for our elected leaders. But I'll follow up on what Michelle suggested, and I do think that the group could suggest a tax study for the county in terms of how do we better position ourselves to raise revenue. Are there things that we could do that we're not doing? So I don't want to, from my standpoint, I have no intention of getting involved in a campaign to do anything with the revenue cap. But I do think a study of county tax policy would be a very good idea. And maybe we should suggest that.
And I'm not disagreeing with that, and I'm not disagreeing with Michelle's suggestion, but I'll go back to if a tax study is warranted and someone wants to, in the same way, I'll do a real life right now. The county executive commissioned a study a few years ago to look at the water and sewer problem, and that study is being undertaken by the engineering firm of GMB in Salisbury, and that study will be presented pretty soon, so we understand. So, again, I'm of the opinion that the Charter Review Committee, these are all good discussion points, but whether it's a tax study or any changes to Section 706, I'm way more comfortable letting let's stay in our lane here as the Charter Review Committee, and let's let the elected officials, if they want a tax study, again, which some of us think is probably a good idea, let's let the elected officials deal with that, and let's try to stay in our Charter Review Committee lane. So what I'm going to do is we're going to move on to Section 707 unless I hear some sort of motion or something along those lines. Laura.
I do have one more handout,
Okay.
but I don't have copies for everyone.
Okay.
But Mr. Benson asked that I just pass it around so everyone can look at it. But at the end of the night, if you can give it back to me, I'll scan it in and email
Okay.
it to everyone.
Is there any chance, and I know that Bob met you in the parking lot, is there a summary that you can, have you had a chance to glance at it, Laura?
I did.
No worries. So what we'll still do, and I'll ask you to keep that there, because I don't want us to get distracted by having that go through however many of us are here. Anybody wants to look at that? And again, we thank Mr. Benson for doing the research that he did, and that'll be down at Laura's station toward the end of the meeting, and thank you for that, Laura. So I'm going to, yes, Julie?
So if we do nothing on 706, by default, that means that we think it's okay. I think historically it means that we're okay with it like it is.
No, I
Or
don't think
You don't need
that's-
a motion to not change something, I think you said.
We've never had a motion to not change anything, and it's not necessarily saying that we're okay with what it is. Going back to what Phil just said, we've made some decisions as pragmatic members of the Wicomico County electorate that some of the things that we're going to go back and decide what it is we present to the county council. We're just trying to be pragmatic that some of the recommendations we know are probably not going to go anywhere, and we can't recommend 35 things. So this is all going to come back to our kind of prioritizing what it is we're doing. But yes, this would go without comment. There's no motion. We've had lots of discussions on lots of other sections, and it's reflected in the minutes, but we don't take any action if we're not taking any action. Being consistent with how we've attempted to do things here.
I just wanted to
Yep.
have it clear in my
Yep,
mind. I didn't want
absolutely.
it to appear that we were shirking our duties by ignoring it because we didn't know what to do.
I will let the public who might pay attention to this determine. I don't think we're ignoring our responsibilities. I think we're making a pragmatic decision that this is better left in the hands of the elected officials. It's a group. Sharon?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just going to add, I agree with what's been said, but my interpretation of the charter review is to ensure that processes are in place, and I think that's what we're doing. Things like
Yeah.
the tax cap and whether or not we should have this form of government were done by the citizenry, so we have to give it back to where it belongs. I think our role is to ensure that the processes are in place that would cause those things to happen.
Thank you, Sharon. Good point. Thank you.
That makes me feel better.
All right. Moving past 706, and Andrew let me know that he found what Laura was mentioning at the beginning, some language, and he found it on his cell phone. So Andrew, welcome. And if you want to share it and read what was and then what the proposed change might be, perhaps that could be helpful.
The change is not dramatic. It currently reads.
What section, please?
Section 707.
Thank you.
Authority to change dates. The county council may, by resolution, change any of the dates set forth in section 704 and 705 herein. Paul's suggestion based on the previous comments, is keep everything after that the same, but insert as follows. The county council may, by resolution, change any of the dates and corresponding hearing dates set forth in section 704 and 705 herein, provided that said resolution states the reasons for said change or changes, and such resolution shall be effective only during the fiscal year in which said resolution is adopted, subject to the restrictions set forth in section 705.
Thank you, Andrew. So for the group and those who may not have been here last time or had full review, when the CIP often gets postponed at the beginning of the calendar year, we had some concern as the Charter Review Committee that the public hearing dates should perhaps also correspond with the postponing of the CIP, is how I think I'm remembering it. So this language would say that if the county council, which it has done with, and again, this has not been contentious, Mr. Holloway, please let me know if I'm off base here, when the CIP deadline date is due, both the county council and the county executive in recent years have postponed that date. What this resolution would do is say if the date gets postponed, the correspondent public hearings would also get postponed concurrently, if you will. Phil, yes, sir.
I move that the proposed language, new language, be part of our recommendation.
Thank
for
you.
Section 707.
Thank you, Phil. Is there a second for that? Sharon, is that a second?
Yes.
That's now on the floor for discussion. Any discussion? Hearing none and seeing none. All those in favor of the motion on the floor to adopt Section 707 as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Andrew, thank you very much.
Yes.
Please tell Paul thank you very much. Great timing, too, as fate would have it. We finished with 7:06, and here we are. I think we had gone through, anybody please correct me, I think we had gone through the rest of Section 700. And Laura?
I think there was some questions, I believe, in here from bond counsel in the 700 range.
Yes, and
Section 712, I think.
Section 712, yes. And bond counsel Lindsay Rader had dropped a voluminous bit of material onto Mr. Wilbur, and I think I won't put Andrew on the spot to interpret that. Paul is on vacation, so if the group is okay, we'll still pass for tonight on 712, unless Andrew wants to go into great length on, okay, we're good.
No, we're good.
We're going to pass on 712. Thank you, Laura, for that. All right, we are now moving into a brand new section, Section 800, or 8, yes, Article 8, excuse me. So, Section 801 and A down through B, looking around the room. Section 802. Yes, sir, Dallas?
Yeah, I just have wanted to feel out everyone's thoughts. In the lower third of 802A, it says contracts for the manner, or contracts for the purchase shall be awarded to lowest responsible bidder who is blah, 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 blah. I was just wondering if maybe that should be from lowest responsible bidder to most qualified bidder. I think there's a lot of times we've seen in government where, you know, when you buy the lowest price thing, doesn't always seem to work out. You get some really crappy items, pardon my French. And I was just wondering if most qualified might not be a better fit. I can tell you from in public works, we've gotten stuck with the lowest bidder before and then spent change order after change order after change order trying to get the job done that we intentionally wanted done. And by the time you're done, you've spent as much or more than the company or piece of equipment that you were originally trying to get. But it's you know, I think it can be put in there, or lowest and most qualified bidder. I think that there's just, when you base a bid selection solely off of price, it becomes challenging to make sure you're getting what you actually need.
Thank you, Dallas. I'm going to ask, yes, sir,
I'll just
Blair?
add to that, it does seem as though after that, when they talk about responsible bidder, who has complied with the specifications and standards as set forth in the bid spec, right? That it seems as though that means they're qualified.
Lowest responsible.
And just having that word qualified you know, it's not gonna 100% guarantee that you don't still get that lowest bidder that doesn't do the best job, you know?
Yeah, what I've found, for, you know, providing all of that, it's the, you have a list of everything you want your bidders to provide.
You gotta have a tight
bid
spec.
bond, you gotta have
Gotta
a
have a tight
performance
spec.
bond, you have to have your insurance. And you can have all of that from 5 different companies, from a Bentley down to a Chevette. And you're like, look, I need something that's going to push trash around the landfill and not break down. You're trying to, you know, sometimes the focus is just too much on, well, this one's cost, you know, 100,000 less. And you're like, yeah, but I can tell you from experience, this piece of equipment or this firm is not going to go do the job.
And we'll end up paying more than that later to
Yeah.
correct the problem.
And maybe
Yeah.
most qualified is not the best term. Maybe there's a better term that.
So let-
Would the
I just know what
lowest
you've been through.
qualified get it?
It's hard.
Rather than the lowest, would you
So-
change the lowest to qualified?
The most qualified.
To the,
Or-
would the lowest qualified bidder?
Yes.
Accomplish
Lowest
it?
and most, yeah, you're gonna have both of those terms together.
Yeah, I was just trying to think if there was a way that we can incorporate the quality.
The quality.
Right.
But what's the difference between qualified and responsible?
Well, responsible is the one, they tend to provide. If you ask them to provide 10 different pieces of documentation in their bid, they
Yeah.
provide all 10 pieces of documentation. So again, your performance bond, your bid bond, your workman's comp insurance, all of those, they've provided the bid back at a time. Their bid is balanced, it's not it's not an unbalanced bid. So those are the items that, you know, you can get a lot of firms in there, but you have someone, and I'll give you a good example. You know, we can have, a lot of times, something will come in, and you'll have, let's say out of a bid of 5, you'll have one that's really high, but let's say you put out a bid for a grade all construction piece of
I
equipment.
know what it is.
So it comes in and you get one bid that's 700,000. You get another bid that's 500, one that's 450, one that's 475, and then you get one that's 125.
You got a problem.
Exactly. There's something, they have missed something, they are providing something wrong, and when they come in, you end up with, okay, you're trying to present this argument of, we don't want to do this one, but and I'll say, I feel like for the most part, leadership in the county understands that, but trying to have that in writing to refute the lowest bidder, so
Okay.
that you don't, because what ends up happening is if you go to that guy or that company that bid 475, then you get into a challenge of, all right, now the guy that bid 125 is suing you because he's the lowest, and it says lowest right here.
Okay.
Oh, hold on.
Dallas, thank you.
I'll shut up.
So why
Lo-
not call it
hold-
lowest responsible qualified
So,
bidder?
hold on, everybody. Excuse me. Laura, I saw Laura's hand up a little while ago. Yes,
I was just going to point out, there is an exception to that, and that's letter B.
correct.
That they can come before council to get permission to
And-
award it to someone who's not the lowest
Yeah,
responsible.
and I was going to ask, thank you, Laura. Joe, since you're here, and Wayne, since you're here, please, Joe, thank you. Joe, you know, you've been listening to this.
We
You've
did
looked
that.
at bids before, and
Yeah.
you don't just automatically take the $125,000 bid, correct?
What we did,
Yeah,
I
thank
believe it was with paving
Okay.
a few years ago. The lower bid came in, and we took the advice of the Public Works Department
Yeah.
to not accept the lower bid because nothing was wrong with the work, they just didn't think they had enough equipment to do it in a timely fashion. So the council overrode and gave it to the next highest bid.
And so, Joe, to that point, you all, again, using Dallas's example, you don't just look at the number, make a motion, take the lowest bid, and move on. You all then have the opportunity as council members to have conversation at the table just like we are, or perhaps you have to have private offline conversation in a closed session to think about the bids. Is that correct?
We usually don't approve all those bids. That's usually done through the executive's
Okay,
office.
right, okay,
But if
that's
if there is a conflict,
Yes, sir.
you know, like we were just
Yeah.
talking about.
Yes, sir.
That's when it would come in front of the council.
Great.
We rely greatly on, you know, the expertise of the Public Works Director or
Great.
the county executive's office or whatever. But that's the way, I remember that one incident
Okay.
in particular. They didn't think that company had enough
Yeah.
equipment, even though they had the bid, better price, and we overrode it.
Thank you very much. Wayne, would you weigh in on what Councilman Holloway was just saying?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on Blair's comment. When you put something out to bid, you've got to have a really tight
Tight
and
spec.
comprehensive spec.
Yes.
And I think, I understand what you're saying, Dallas, but I don't think that we should modify the county charter. What I think we should do is look at our operational performance and our operational policies and procedures to ensure that we're writing as tight and comprehensive specs as we can. And then when we review our bid processes, that we're doing as good a job as possible in reviewing those specs and making the best decisions. So to me, this is really an operational matter that it needs to be tightened up. I think that's where we should address it, not in the charter.
And I agree. It's just when there are vendors that point to
Understood.
this language.
So here's what I'm going to do. See you, Tony. Is there a motion that you would like to offer?
Yeah, I'll give it a try. I'd like to add on 802A to revise the language that starts off, contracts for the purchase shall be awarded to the lowest and most qualified responsible bidder.
Thank you. Yep, et cetera. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. There's a second. Now we'll entertain any more discussion on this. Michelle, I see your hand.
I don't see anything in the requested changes from the council on this at all.
Correct. But that's,
All right, I just wanted to
no,
make sure.
No, and you're right. This is
This is-
purely from the
Absolutely.
experience that I had with
and we're,
multiple bids.
to remind everybody and everybody who may be watching at home, we're not just reacting to the recommendations of the council. We have the opportunity to look at this charter independently without looking necessarily at their comments. So, any other discussion on the motion on the floor? Yes, sir.
I have
Doug?
a question.
Yes, sir.
I have a question with the $5,000 mark. That's awful low
Where,
for a county. Isn't it? Second-
I see it right there. Well,
We have that in Sharptown, and you gotta go out and see bids for something for $5,000. You can't buy a tire for that piece of equipment he was talking about for $5,000. You gotta go out for bids for that? I mean, I'm just asking Dallas if he's okay with that.
Laura?
That was increased. It does say that, or such amount as may be set by legislative act, and
Yeah.
that was
We did
increased.
raise that, didn't we?
I think it was 25,000.
25,000.
For it's 25,000 for competitive bidding, and there's a threshold of 10 to 25 for 3 quotes.
How does it say that?
There's a purchasing manual.
So it doesn't say that in the charter, but so right back to Wayne's point, this is operational, it's already been handled?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a motion. Thank you, Doug, for bringing that up. Thank you, sir. I apologize. There's a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion on the motion? Okay. Yes, sir, Phil?
I'm going to vote yes only because I like Dallas.
Okay. Well, there's a nice caveat for the record. Any other discussion? I think I'm going to weigh in and say I'm probably going to oppose this simply because I'm not sure it's possible to qualify or quantify the phrase most qualified. I realize that the lowest responsible bidder, for me, that covers it based on what I've heard here tonight. I just have trouble again, quantifying or qualifying what defines most. So that's just where I am on this. Is there anybody else who'd like to weigh in? Okay, we're going to call for a vote on the motion to change section 802A. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. No. I'm going to have to ask, because I can't tell. If all those in favor would raise their hands. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. All those opposed, please raise their hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So by a vote of 7 to 5, that motion fails. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dallas. Good discussion, everyone. Yes, Tony?
We went by B. I'd like to go back to that if I could.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but we're there now. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Okay. I thought you'd gone by.
No, we're good.
It's about the school system, and in it, it says that what the provisions in A apply to schools, but, and you can correct me here, school construction is not in that. And school construction, as I recall, is the interagency on school construction deals directly with the board. It's state funding, has nothing to do with the county council. And I don't know if this blocks that out. I think we ought to try to clear that up a little bit, because if they're renovating a school, the school system goes to the interagency on school construction, IAC, they request the funding. They might get some county funding, but the bulk of it comes through the state of Maryland. So somehow, when I read B, it sounds like school construction falls in that same category, and to me, it doesn't. And I don't know if we ought to address that somehow in there.
And
So
thank you.
I'm leaving it there, and then we'll have to figure it out, but it's a different issue.
In the electronic version of this charter, when you click on that, it explains what's inside of that. So we might need to just take a look at that, make sure it's not already in there. You can't see that on paper, but in the electronic version, you can click on it.
So Sharon, you're saying that perhaps what Tony is addressing
Could be.
not is, but could be. Wayne, do you have? Yes, sir, Phil.
Practical standpoint, if the county is purchasing heating oil, I know a little bit about it.
Yes, you do.
Then the school system and the county buildings can fall under the same contract. That's for obvious reasons.
Right.
But if there's something that has to do with computers or something that are specifically relegated for the schools, then this would apply here. I think that's the reason it's in here.
That's in there. I'm back on school construction.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
Phil,
the
I-
county-
you-
the county really doesn't do much of anything on school construction. As I recall.
no, I agree.
Right, but what it does, I think, Phil, you're saying that what construction it does is covered under B and doesn't need to be a separate item in there relating to school construction. Is that what you're?
I think that's what it's getting at.
Tony, I think you're, clearly that's a good notion. Joe, you came up tonight, so since you're here, Wayne and/or Councilman Holloway, Joe, would you mind coming to the microphone? And this is not a put you under the lights.
It's almost election time. I need all
I know,
the
that's what I'm
airtime
saying.
I
Thank
can
you
get,
for
know.
thank you for being here so that we can ask you this.
Okay.
So if you just heard that, Tony's kind of thinking that this B section should have something in there about school construction. Has this ever been an issue that you've been on the council for a while? Is this?
We have a council member that serves on the school construction committee.
Okay.
I don't know, other than maybe paving the parking lots.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intermingling of purchases that would go on as far as construction of the schools.
Right.
You know
Understood.
what I'm saying?
Yes,
Now,
sir.
I mean, if it comes to buying, the county needed new laptops and the school did at the same time. If
Yeah.
you're buying insurance or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
I could see that. I don't know what the committee's thoughts
Okay.
are as far as changing it, whether they
Right.
thought it needs changing or
Okay.
not.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Wayne, you got any inside baseball knowledge on whether there's a bit of a challenge here, a problem here?
No, I suspect that what this was intended to do was to impose those same requirements on the Board of Education if in fact the materials were being paid for directly by the county. But in terms of school building construction, the county's only role, at least during my lifetime, in the executive office, has been to appropriate.
I'm sorry, Wayne, I didn't hear.
Is to appropriate.
Our only role has been to appropriate the funds necessary to build the school. We do not get involved
In the contract.
we don't
No.
get involved.
No.
The School
No.
Building Commission does. County executive has a representative
Right.
on the School Building Commission, as does the county council. And I would just simply say, the School Building Commission, I think, does an excellent job. But I've never seen a problem in that regard.
And you know, we're the only county with a school building commission in the state.
Did not know that.
It makes us special.
And it works.
And it
And
works.
it works.
So why don't we do this, Tony? Why don't we take advantage of what Sharon mentioned about the online version, and we'll come back and touch on this and see if it's covered there, and we'll come back to this at the next meeting. You okay with that?
Yeah, yeah.
I understand your concerns, and you're fighting for something that's of passion to you, and you just want to make sure that school construction is kind of covered under this. So we'll look into that.
Right.
Okay, thank you. 803, anyone? All right, we're moving on to Article 9, Section 901, Section 902, Section 903, Section 904.
I've got a question.
Yes, hold up.
903.
Tony, which
It
one?
says under inspection of public records, you can inspect any public.
This is
record.
903.
Yeah, at a reasonable time and cost. You often read that they'll say, well, you want to come down and look at the record, that's fine, and we'll make a copy for you. Well, the copy 2 pages is $50. I'm just being facetious when I say that. But that is a way to avoid complying with a citizen who wants to see so I would just like to see us at a reasonable time and cost. That's all I'm asking.
All right.
That's a way to kind of make it difficult for somebody to get a copy. They can read it, but they might say, well, can I get a copy of that? Yeah, for X amount of dollars, it's not worth it. I would just like to see us at a reasonable time and cost.
Is that a, Julie?
If you
Those
look at
are
the
902s.
footnote,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, hold on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Julie, hold on. Excuse me. Julie.
so 903, there's a
Yes.
footnote. The footnote at the bottom of the page states that it'll follow by the Maryland Public Information Act.
And that's what we do. That's what governs.
So I'm going by the same thing. If we're going to use another document as the end-all, then we certainly don't want to overstep by adding in here. I want to make sure that we check on the details of the Public Information Act if we're going to change the
I
charter.
don't know what that says.
The MPIA allows the government to set a reasonable cost which factors in supplies, time and energy, and,
Employee time.
yeah, exactly. It's been about 50 cents a page or so, and then a certain cost for CDs from last 2 years I've been working on, I would say. Is
So
about the
that's-
cost.
Okay.
So the state law, the MPIA Title 10, Subtitle 6, doesn't set a cost, so it would not be contrary.
Okay.
You could set a cost in section 902, or make the recommendation for the council to set a cost.
So Tony's thought on reasonable time and cost, you're suggesting is better addressed in 902 than in 903?
It can be in either section or both, but I think you wanted to set a specific
Cost.
it could be enumerated there, but
What's that?
It's really addressed by state law.
It's currently addressed by state law. So, again, Tony, do you want to make a motion?
No,
Okay.
I'm just throwing it out there.
No, noted.
I think that that could be a catch-all for denying somebody something that they want. You know, Joe Citizen goes down to get something done, he says, I'd like to get a copy, yeah, we can do it, but you gotta pay
50
time of
cents.
the person, this, and before you know it, he says, the heck with it, I'm not that interested.
Okay, thank you. Blair?
Just looking at this, and it looks to me like 902 references actual copies of documents, and it does reference a reasonable fee in there for fees, whereas section 903 just is involving the inspection of public, like if you want to go in and read a public document. I know in the school system, we have asbestos documents that we have to make available to anyone at a reasonable time, et cetera, that they can come in to the office of a school and review those and look at those. If they want copies of those, then yeah, we'd charge them for that. But we have to make those available for review, and that's how I would look at those two sections.
Yeah.
Thank you, Blair. Very
I
helpful.
think it says it in 902, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Right.
Okay. Section 9, you know what? We're going to take a 5-minute break. We've been sitting for an hour. Everybody get up for 5 minutes and stretch your legs. Thank you. We're back in session. A couple things I failed to do earlier is inform the group, again, giving Laura a shout out that there was a conflict. Remember, the government office building is shared by the city of Salisbury and Wicomico County. So the conflict that booted us out of the government office building this month, Laura has, I think, corrected that, and now you want to...
Yeah, it was just for this meeting,
Right,
actually.
yes.
So what happened was the City of Salisbury Planning Zoning Commission was meeting remotely.
Yeah.
And so when they started going back in person, which was tonight is their first meeting,
Sure.
she just added it to the calendar
Yeah.
as she would normally do, which obviously created a conflict with our meeting. Unfortunately, though, they had advertised the public hearing.
Right.
So I said, let me check to see if there's a room at the Civic Center, and if so, we'll just relocate because I don't want you to have to cancel your public hearing. And so that's why we're here.
So, Laura, thank you very much for coordinating that for us and giving in, if you will, good decision so everybody can function. And while we're at it, again, for those of us in the room and those who may view this, a shout out to the Civic Center for being available to us, not just tonight, but over the course of our work here. And a shout out to our friend who's behind the control board, Tony Broadbent, who's as good as they come. And I think the reason we were just delayed is he just made some copies of things. So Tony, thank you and the Civic Center for all that you do. All right, now we're officially resumed at section 904. Catherine, I believe you had a...
There is mention in the proposal summaries from the council. Would you like for me to read what they're proposing?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. The county council is responsible for hiring external auditors to review all financial transactions, books, and records of the county and to prepare the county's financial statements. During the audit process, the auditors report to the county executive, not the council, but the auditors present a summary of the financial statements each year to the council at the conclusion of the audit. Should this section be expanded to provide the council oversees the audits?
Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. Thoughts by anybody in the room on that question?
I think that's a pretty bad idea.
Wayne, can you speak into your mic a little bit?
I don't think that's a very good idea. Getting the audit done is a really cumbersome task. The auditors are hired by the county council. The auditors present the full audit and financial statements to the county council. So I don't see the need for changing the process.
Thank you, Wayne. Catherine?
And I would actually agree with Wayne on that one.
All right, thank you. Other thoughts on 904?
I agree as well. that process is a day-to-day operation. Day-to-day falls to the executive because
Alright.
he's available day-to-day.
Thank you, Sharon. Hearing no other thoughts or any motion, we'll move beyond 904. Laura, I'm looking down at you because I know you and I, all right, we're good. All right, 904 takes us to 905. Dallas wants to weigh in on the county seal. I'm kidding. 906, 907. All right, we are now into Article 10, Section 1001. Tony, yes, sir?
One, I was surprised that's in there, to be quite frank, but that's not what I comment. You notice that if they revert back, it says go back to county commissioners. And when they went to this, it was county council. That's a small
See that?
thing, but I think it ought to say county council members or whatever, but not county commissioners.
I had that circled as well. Is that, I don't, is that perhaps, have the, yeah, I mean, we're a county council. We don't call ourselves county commissioners. And it may have been a typo, but it's a typo that we've witnessed and we should probably address. Tony, it's I've got other things in 10, Article 10. I have Julie, I have a thought, but go ahead. Julie, yes, please.
1201.
We're not
Well, it addresses it.
1201.
In accordance with provisions of the Maryland Constitution, commissioners shall, with a charter, refer to the county council whenever construction would be reasonable. County council shall succeed to all powers therefore vested in county commissioners by the Constitution and laws of the state.
So in effect, what Tony's mentioning sort of is allowable by Section 1201. Is that what you're saying?
That's what it sounds like. to me.
Yeah, okay. Good point. I'm going to take the opportunity. The first sentence in Section 10 is something that, I looked at and was curious about. And it says the county council may by legislative act approved by the affirmative vote of at least 5 members propose the termination of this charter and return of the county to the same or to the form of government in effect prior to the adoption of this charter. That would then have to go to the voters, of course. I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that on any given Tuesday, 5 members of the county council could put forth a motion to revert back to the former form of government. Now, that motion then must go to the voters, and so it ultimately is up to the voters. And I wish Bob Benson was here because he has attempted to talk me off the ledge on this one and saying that it's redundant. I'll let the group talk me off the ledge on this one. Thoughts? Again, I'm just saying out loud. Phil? Yes, sir.
Section 1002.
Yep.
Or 1002, excuse me. They can amend it also by 5 votes.
Amend the charter.
I mean, that's more practical. The 1001, I doubt would ever take place.
Okay.
Or be accepted by the voters. But they could, if we're talking about the tax cap, for instance.
Sure.
Excuse me, the
Revenue cap. There is no tax cap in this county.
The revenue cap could be changed by 5 votes.
Right.
Whether we recommend it or don't recommend it,
Right.
that's my point.
Right.
It's
So you've
just
talked
pretty-
me off. You've talked me off the ledge sufficiently. Thank you. Tony, the 1001 and the group. What does the group want to do with Tony's thought on county commissioners in light of? I forget who mentioned 1201, but Julie did. Does the group? I think we're covered, but because I think 1201 is there, is the group okay with that, or does the group want to put a motion to have that say county council where it says county commissioners?
I think it's drafting cleanup and we ought to.
We should clean it up? Do you want, would you like to make a motion, Wayne?
I make that motion.
You want to speak into your microphone and make your motion, please?
I move that we clean up the drafting and change commissioner to county council members.
Okay, there's 3 places in this paragraph where county commissioner is mentioned, and you're suggesting in all 3 places we change that to county council.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second for that?
Second.
Tony, that was you? Any discussion?
Discussion.
Sharon, yes.
Should that also be included in definitions and rules where the transitional language is?
Show me where we are, what you're referencing, Sharon, I apologize.
In the back of it for, where is it, transitional language, if we should, no.
I see
If you
one
just
under
flip a-
1203 says county commissioners. I see that a few times. So let's do this. Let's do one section at a time, and we get to 12, we'll address it there. I'm sorry.
Actually, what I mean is where it's definition and rules, should we actually put it in there so
And I-
that it would be for wherever it appears?
Okay, and I guess I'm asking, where is definition and rules?
1101.
Just flip one over, 1101.
Thank you, 1101.
Just add a number 15.
Okay,
Yeah.
so are you suggesting that we add one? Add a rule?
Add a rule.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And what would that rule read?
Wherever it reads.
Just what Wayne's
What
motion.
Wayne, I see.
Yeah, would be,
Okay.
so that it could go here and it wouldn't have to go before the
The
voters
voters.
as a change. It would just be part of the definitions rule.
Okay. Should say, and I'm just talking out loud here, should say county council, not county commissioner. Right? So we would add any reference to the county governing body would say county council, not county commissioner. Okay. With that, Wayne, would you like to withdraw your, excuse me, for the group, time out, there's a motion on the floor. You've heard what Sharon's suggestion is. Thoughts from the group on that suggestion before I ask Wayne to withdraw his motion? Does everybody understand what Sharon is proposing? Yep. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yes. Wayne, would you please withdraw your motion?
I withdraw my motion.
Thank you very much. Section 1002. Sorry, thank you, Phil. I take my cues from over here to my left. Thank you, Phil. Section 1002. That's it, 1002. All right. We're moving to Article 11, Section 1101. We would like Sharon. You want to make that formal motion, or Wayne, who wants to make that? Sharon?
I make a motion that where the word commissioner appears throughout the charter, the language should mean county council.
Thank you. Well said. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Phil. Discussion. Catherine?
Just to make sure it's in alignment with all the other changes, that it would actually read number 15, the words county commissioner shall refer to county council person.
Fine.
Well, Catherine, where are you? I'm sorry. I'm
I'm
trying.
just
She's adding it.
adding to.
Number 15.
Oh.
that
Oh,
we-
you're
we
saying
create
it would
number
be rule
15.
number 15.
And
Correct.
so it balances with the other rules.
Right.
It just says the words county commissioner shall refer to county council person. That's it.
Yes. Sharon, are you okay with that language?
Mhm.
All right. So I think the motion that's on the floor can stand. Okay. Any discussion on that? All those in favor of making that definition change, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Covered. Thank you. Anything else in section 11, Article 11? Michelle?
Only thing I want to comment on is we go back through and look at things again that we are going to,
Yep.
that I notice here the word shall be construed as mandatory and may be construed as permissive, that perhaps that applies to other things where we change language,
Okay.
okay? to look
So
at-
as we go back, let's look at
That may
that.
simply be a rule instead
Yeah.
of changing the wording
Yep.
in that part of the charter, that's all I'm
Yep.
saying.
And as we all know, that's a key word, that shall and that may. Thank you, Michelle. We'll move on to Article 12. Thoughts? I'm sorry, 1201, I apologize. 1202. 1203. 1204. Looking around the room, 1205. Okay, Sharon?
I just want to ask a question. I don't want to change anything.
Certainly.
The county seal that you currently use, was that adopted by the county council?
I have Absolutely no idea at all.
I don't know.
No idea. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Laura, do you know? Does anybody know?
I don't know. You're
Okay.
referring to the one with the yellow background with the Indian in the middle of it? Because I know Bob Culver had
No, I'm
designed
talking
his
about
own
that
as
one,
well.
the one that had
That-
the Indian in it. I know there was a resolution for that.
Okay, the one that Bob Culver did, no, that was never approved by council.
Okay.
I
We're
guess my question might-
transitioning back to the one with the Indian in the middle.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Wayne,
guess
you have a
my-
question?
Yeah, my question, Mike,
Yeah.
is Article 12 is transitional provisions.
Yes.
That's history. That's how we transition from the county council form of government to the executive form of government.
All of
So-
this section,
So revisiting history is
Right.
sort of moot.
so does 1201 need to be in here, Article 12? I mean, I guess it's just the standing history book of what we've done, and that's all that it is. Okay. I think we have worked our way through the charter, everybody, for our first pass through the charter. A round of applause for everyone. Thank you very much. We are, what did you say, Phil? Oh, you said something. I know you said something.
Want to start all over again?
So, where we are, just for, again, this group and anybody who may be watching, our agenda number 1 stops tonight at section 12. What we have talked about all along, and what I think we would probably do, is have Laura send us, really would be the final scorecard that we have, right, the score sheet of what we have done. We still have a few committee members who are not here tonight who had some tasks to look up they were going to do some outside work. So with the caveat that those members who are not here who have been assigned some homework may come back and give us the report, like Wayne did tonight with the revenue cap, that we would take their report and receive their report at the next meeting. Otherwise, Laura, I think where we are moving forward is you get us our completed scorecard, which would reflect where we are and the motions and actions that we want to have recommended. We'll then, again, as we've said all along, we'll go back one by one and look at them. Once Laura sends them to the group, and Laura, just a question of transparency here, will that scorecard be posted publicly, like on the county website as well as?
It's there now.
It's there now, thank
I've
you.
been updating it as, yeah,
Okay,
yes.
so we're not going to, so we all can look at that before the next meeting and begin, at least in our own brains, and come forward to the table ready to rank them, ready to prioritize them, and ready to revisit each one of them, right? Revisiting them could take 10 seconds, in which case we don't need to revisit, or we revisit. Confusing enough? So that's kind of where we are. As Bob Benson and I have had conversation, I think it was last week, actually it was a little bit before the last meeting, I think as a group, I don't know, when did we start? April? March? April? March. We had, we were talking at that first meeting that this might take, I think we are officially, as a group, and credit to the group and everybody in this room and those who are not in the room, I think we're officially way ahead of our schedule, which I view as a very positive thing. And so we'll begin that process of revisiting what we proposed at the next meeting. Group okay with that?
Yep.
All right. Laura, yes, please.
So there's a couple more items on the list of questions from council that have new sections.
Thank
on
you.
it.
Okay.
Maybe we can look at those as well at the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And yeah, there's one, number 31, 2, 3, yeah, about 3 more questions. Thank you for that, Laura. So with that, again, we're a little ahead of schedule, which is a good thing, and it is time for public comments at this point in time. Anybody? Yes, sir. Mr. Palmer, please.
Good evening, my name's John Palmer, and congratulations on finishing this in such a quick time.
Thank you.
I'm sure the citizens will all enjoy that. And Mike, I'm so glad you mentioned history earlier when you first started to talk. And Tony, I remember at about the second meeting you mentioned about the revenue cap, and you said it was done by the people and it should only be changed by the people, and I thoroughly agree with that. I was one of the originators of that legislation. I do remember why it started, and I think history should remember some pretty distinct things. One, it started because it was down at the Ward Museum. Was anybody there that night? Phil, were you there at the Ward Museum when that was announced?
Well, if he was, go ahead.
Okay.
I didn't miss many meetings.
Right, yeah, correct.
Yeah, okay,
That's right.
it was announced that there was going to be a 24% property tax increase this year. And what a lot of people didn't hear right after that, there was a small section where they said, and also we're going to add an 11 to 14% increase the following year. And that's when people really got into an uproar. And
That got your attention, didn't it, John?
got my attention.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I was, in fact, you know, that meeting you mentioned that Wayne went to at SU,
Yeah.
he wasn't the only one there.
Right, no.
I was there.
Yeah.
I was invited. I was still down at University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I have no idea why I was invited. It's like inviting a match to a gas party. And but the meeting went very well. So that's part of history I'd like to remember.
Yes, sir.
And Wayne, you spend a lot of time on these figures that you presented tonight, and I want you to know I appreciate it. I do take those figures home, and I will read over them a couple times and just take in what it says. Some people may think it's boring, but I think it's some pretty interesting stuff that you find in there. And somebody wants to know history. They want to know what really fired people up. I got a piece of history right here in my hand. You know, in the Daily Times, they normally had every year, every June 30th, I think, there was a page and a half, maybe 2 pages of properties for sale. Well, after that 24% increase, this is Daily Times, again, piece of history, 12 pages. 12 pages of places where people simply could not afford that extra $20, $100, whatever it was. And that's what really gets people fired up. It gets me fired up to this day because we are not a rich county. We have people who are simply living on the edge. And increasing property taxes the way this was done back then is simply not acceptable. So thank you for sticking with what Tony said earlier in this meetings, and good luck.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you,
John,
John.
I just want to say, we had just gotten into our property in '88 when we bought the farm and the house we lived in and all, and this just about decimated us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
They're here, hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thank you, Michelle. Yes, sir, Mr. Taylor.
Good evening. It's
Good
been
evening.
a while. I have a little bit of a cough in my throat.
No
It's
worries.
not COVID. I've been double vaxxed.
Yes, sir.
I think your decision not to change anything substantively on the tax cap is a good decision.
It's a revenue cap, just for the
Yeah,
record.
revenue
Thank
cap,
you.
correct. You
Okay.
know, the property tax revenue cap, to be fully explanatory. The reason, I think, is somewhat similar to the decision not to consider the county executive, and you're either right on both scores or wrong on both scores, but at least in terms of the decision not to change substantively, or recommend change substantively, I think is a good idea. I think the better reason for not doing it is because I think the broad tax study should be made. In other words, even if you feel like, well, gee, maybe we should do away with the CPI limitation so that it's just a 2% cap max. Let's look at the full tax story before we start tinkering around with parts of it. And as I've said in the memo I sent you all, there are other tax mechanisms that can be used. One we don't use was mentioned is the transfer tax. I'm going to give Ms. Hurley, she can pass it around. It's a list that was published by the state about 6 or 7 months ago that shows the revenue on all the different counties and their transfer tax rate. I think I agree with Mr. Strasburg. Cecil County is probably the most comparable. Cecil, for example, has a 0.5% transfer tax. Their revenue expected this year is $1,674,000. Some counties have a 1%. In fact, there are a good many that do. And that would be twice that amount, obviously, if that were the case. The recordation tax is another one. We do have a recordation tax. We're at the lower level. We're in the lower half in terms of the rate in the state. That could be increased as well. Just to give you another example on that, Cecil County is a bit higher than ours. They had are expecting 5.4 million off that tax. Ours is a little lower. We're expecting 3.7. So there are other ways of raising revenue besides changing the tax revenue cap. And I'll give these to her now. A couple of other quick comments. Wayne's figures are interesting. I would say this, Wayne, in terms of the percentage of inflation in the different 10-year periods in your study, it comes down, of course. The highest is the first one, 50 years ago. And I think part of that is because of the fact that, as I'm sure you know, and probably most people here do, for the last, 15, 20 years, the Fed's desired goal has been 2% inflation. Haven't always met it. And of course, right now, this year, it's all over the place because of what happened last year. But that's one reason why that has happened, I think, and why those earlier figures don't really mean very much. And of course, that was before we had the tax cap anyway. That was before 2000. So that's just an observation, that's all. I would suggest one change in the cap, though, and it's not substantive, but it's the third item that Talbot County changed, and that was to clarify that what's called the constant yield applies. Now, in the material that was passed out, I think that was Mr. Benson's.
Yes.
It's the second page, and it's question B on Talbot County's changes. And it's technical, to be sure. And I think maybe I would suggest that Laura and maybe your staff, county staff, look at it and see if maybe that isn't what we do now, because I believe it is from my experience on the council as the attorney. And I think there's a question. It would be very hard to just sit down and do the math for the tax cap. So what we do is this constant yield is information we get from the Department of Assessments and Taxation, and it gives us assessment numbers. And to sit down and do that property by property would probably take 10 people a month and a half, even with computers. And that's why essentially we do it that way, and that's why Talbot County does it that way. They modified their charter last year to say specifically this is how it's going to work, and I think that would be a good idea. I'll try to kind of summarize just on some other thoughts. I didn't realize you'd get through the whole thing tonight.
We're done. Yes,
sir.
sir.
Well, I think
not done.
Didn't Laura make the comment that we have material from bond counsel?
We do.
Yes.
And we haven't looked at that yet.
That's right.
Correct.
And I would suggest in that section, or in that part of the code, that article on tax, on revenue and taxes and all, take another look at that, because those provisions are very complex, and I think it would be wise to look at some other county charters, because we're all in the same boat in terms of this. One aspect of it in particular, the timing of the capital improvement plan, the CIP, that part of the budget. I understand the change that was recommended by Paul Wilbur and read tonight, but I think it might be better off just to, and most counties, I think, do this already, and I've looked at it, but not for some months. They just provide you're going to adopt them at the same time. And you can have the public hearings anytime you want to.
Yeah, we discussed that.
And I think that might be a better change than the change that was proposed, to do it that way, because it doesn't really make sense to adopt the CIP budget really long before you adopt your general budget. It just doesn't make sense because they're so integrated, they're so integral. So I'd suggest that. The matter that Dallas Baker brought up, may be worthwhile taking a look at some of the other charters on purchasing. There might be some other language. I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with what's there, but I understand his concern. Anything else I have, I'll send to you by email.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, good night.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I want to just make sure for the record, we are by and large concluded our first pass, but as Mr. Taylor has pointed out, and I hope I've made clear, that's sort of a general statement. We know we have to go back and do some things. Also, truly want to thank Councilman Holloway. We put you on the spot a few times tonight, but the information you shared was very helpful for the committee. We thank you for that. With that, everyone, thank you for tonight. We'll see you in a few weeks, and we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.